because they are the most advanced monetary union in the world, as they started this unification process with the customs union, with many other activities going on. So the European Union started its currency in 1999 on January the 1st. They put it into circulation, and they started this currency like sort of a national currency. First it was electronically used only. The euro was introduced on the stock exchange, and it started its trading against the US dollar. First, the exchange rate collapsed. The euro went down as low as 83 euro cents against the 83 US cents against a euro. Later it started picking up. It appreciated up to $1.18, and so this currency proved to be not really a stable currency. Many economists in Europe, many German economists, mostly the German economists, were against the introduction of this currency. In 1999, Wilhelm Hankel, a very famous German economist, plus three other professors at various German universities, filed a lawsuit against the euro in the Supreme Court of Germany. Supreme Court of Germany Bundesgerichtshof, the federal court in Germany, decides such issues. It is considered to be the supreme judicial power, not only in Germany but also in Europe. It is a very respected institution, and it is listened to by many countries. So, these four professors filed a lawsuit against the euro. That was an unbelievable situation, because this was this currency was introduced digitally. It was not used in banknotes, and there were no coins, so they did not issue this currency yet by the time. So these four scientists, economists, hoped that they could prevent the euro from the introduction. And they filed this lawsuit. They constructed a prognosis, and based on that prognosis, they said to the court that that there's going to be a very deep economic crisis after the introduction of the euro. And they explained why. The court listened to them for several days. There was a series of hearings, and they said in the end that maybe your projections are true. We do not know that, because we judge only when something happened already. So first there must be a crisis, then you come again and we'll decide this question again. So we do not take decisions upon projections, right? Courts do not usually do that. Or actually not usually, but they do not do that at all. They judge only when the crime is committed. You got to kill someone first, and then the court will decide whether you killed someone or whether you're guilty or not guilty. So the euro was introduced, but that was an unprecedented event. It never happened in history. No other people filed lawsuits against the decision of a group of countries. The most powerful politicians were behind this decision when they signed and ratified the Maastricht Treaty in 1993. And this Maastricht Treaty said that there's going to be a single currency. Then they confirmed their decision in 1995 in Madrid, and they developed a name for the currency, the euro. I said already this story about why this currency was called the euro. First, they wanted to use écu, which was a European currency unit in 1979-1998 that was never circulated in real monetary circulation, in monetary issue. There was not a central bank in those days. The only country that issued this currency was, like I said last time, Luxembourg, because this country did not have its own national currency in those days, and it was part of an economic union which is still today called Benelux, including these three nations: Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. And when the écu was introduced as a collective currency for the 12 nations in the European Economic Community, as it was called back then, in 1979, this small country decided to introduce this currency as its own. So we can find écu banknotes and écu coins only in museums today, because this currency was used only by one country. They introduced it, and later they started circulating it. Also, we think about the period back then, about the introduction of the euro. So actually, the euro started circulating from January the 1st, 2002, because there must have been a transition period, and this transition period lasted for almost 4 years, because they thought that maybe this is not going to work at all, and it was a very serious issue, the introduction of a single currency for 12 countries of the European Union. That was a very bold step to take. Europe was still dependent on the idea that Germany was the most stable country, the most economically dependent country in Europe, and its currency, Deutsche Mark, was the most stable currency in the world. Almost the very stable currency in the world. Now, this currency this currency belonged to actually one of the greatest exporting nations in the world. Germany was a super exporting power in the world, and that's why this currency was a hard currency. It was like a dollar, the US dollar, but it was used mostly in Europe. And many countries pegged its currency to Deutschmarks, to DM marks. So when the euro was introduced, those scientists who filed the lawsuit, they explained that Deutschmarks were much more stable than the euro. However, like we know, the euro was still introduced, and many nations, many people in the Union were very, very happy about that. They were euphoric about the introduction of this currency. However, to introduce a currency for 12 countries was not a very easy issue. You got to have an infrastructure, of course. There was already infrastructure in place. We know that in the world we've got a SWIFT system, and this SWIFT system is used to circulate, to make transactions, to make international settlements. Europe did not have its own system, settlement system. It had to be created. They started to create the system back in the 1970s, 80s, when they introduced ECUs. So they started to think about what kind of a system that's gonna be. And later, by 1996, so the euro could not be introduced without a system which was similar to the SWIFT system, right? So they got to create something like SWIFT. The same issue in Russia. We had the same issue in 2014 when Russia annexed the Crimea, and we could not introduce some of the international settlements, and the government started thinking about introducing its own payment system, settlement system. We did not have in our country an independent settlement system. We used MasterCard and Visa, and there was a threat that we could actually be switched off from the SWIFT altogether. This not happened, of course, but this situation became an important factor for the government to think about introducing its own settlement system. And we introduced it, and we called it MIR, payment system, which is used only in Russia, and maybe in some of the CIS countries, the Commonwealth of Independent States. Although there are countries here still afraid of using it because they are afraid of international sanctions. So that system is mostly used in Russia only. And in Europe, they started thinking about doing something of the sort, something similar. To be independent of the SWIFT, they got to have some sort of a transaction system. And they called it Target. That was in 1996, 2 or 3 years before the introduction of the euro. Yeah, in 1996. Target, in English, this is actually a word. It has its own meaning, objective or a goal, target. But this is an abbreviation, which translates as the Trans-European Express Real-Time Gross Settlement System, or just simply Target. And this system is working just like any SWIFT, because there was a series of SWIFTs introduced. They modernized this system during a couple of decades, dating back to the 1950s and 1960s, when they tried to introduce the system for the whole world back then. The system had to be based on just one single currency, which was the US dollar, and all transactions happened in US dollars. Still today, mostly SWIFT transactions are done in dollars. The target system was created for the independent use by this currency. Well, like I said, it was January the 1st, 1999, when everything started. The major problems with the euro and the single currency in the monetary union was that there were countries in the union that were very, very economically weak. For example, they can be divided into two groups mostly, these countries in the European Monetary Union. The countries of the north and the countries of the south. This group of scientists I mentioned, they offered as a choice to introduce 2 euros, 1 euro for the south and the other euro for the north. But they got to be independent currencies, and there got to be 2 monetary unions. It was this moment when they started speculating about this idea of 2-speed monetary union, 2-speed union. So there is one speed and another speed, another pace. They said that the countries of the north, these are the most stable, economically stable countries in the European Union. They include, of course, Germany, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, Austria. They are the most stable countries in economic terms. They had the lowest deficit, debt to GDP ratio was the lowest there. And in the EU, there were, of course, weaker countries, the countries of the south, such as Spain, Portugal, Italy. Even France was not considered a very stable, economically stable country. So they were still running quite high inflation rates, and they had debt to GDP ratio of something like 80 or 90%. Still to these days, they are running huge debt to GDP ratios. Italy's national currency, Italian lira, was a very weak currency, one of the weakest currencies in the Union before the introduction of the euro. They were running inflation rates of 20 to 40% annually. And Germany was running 2% inflation rate annually. So how can you make a monetary union with countries of 2% inflation rate and 30% inflation rate? How is that possible? That was not the only problem. The other problem was that in these countries there were different taxation systems, and they paid different tax rates. Income tax rates in Germany are still one of the highest in the European Union. On average, they pay a 36% tax rates, income tax rates in Germany, on average, because they've got a progressive system, like in most advanced countries. And they, the more you earn, the more you pay to the government in terms of taxes. In Greece, in Italy, taxes are lower, of course. In Greece, before the euro crisis in 2012, they still had tax rates, income tax rates of 12 to 15%. That was the lowest income tax rates in the Union. So again, this question, how can you make a union, one country, one single currency, with countries who have different tax rates? How is it possible? And yet there was a third problem also. Not only inflation, not only tax rates, they also had different loan rates. And what is a loan rate in general? This is a price you pay to use money in an economy. So this is something you got to pay for using money. In Greece, you paid just like in Russia. You paid 18-20% annually in order to take a loan. In Germany, you paid only 4% or 3%. That was very, very low. And what did the Greeks do after they entered the monetary union? They went crazy and started buying everything on credit. They bought thousands of cars, luxury cars. They bought Porsche cars from Germany, for instance, the most luxurious car in Europe, I believe. And they bought it using loans, because loans became very, very cheap. They bought yachts, thousands of yachts. When this crisis hit in 2012, the Euro crisis, the great Euro crisis in 2012, they abandoned their yachts in thousands because taxes suddenly started. The government decided to increase taxes on using yachts in this country. And they thought that they could not pay for them any longer. And they just abandoned them. And they were staying just like a fleet of some sort of a country. A whole fleet of yachts used by nobody. And also they had to somehow pay their debts because they were running really high, and they started selling Porsche cars. And you could buy a Porsche car in Greece very cheap in those days. In 2012, people in Russia who knew about that bought in Greece those second-hand cars and resold them in Russia at very high profit, because some of those cars were really, really good, although they were second-hand, but some of them were very, very good cars, and Russian businessmen really benefited from reselling those cars in Russia. So they bought a Porsche car at maybe 10,000 euros and sold it here in Russia at 3 times or 4 times its price. Because nobody knew about that. It was only later known that Greeks were really crazy about selling their Porsche cars in those days. So, how can you make a union of such different countries, with different loan rates, with different inflation rates, with different everything? So, this is not only the matter of language or the matter of borders. So, Europe has, of course, in Europe there is no single language. English is not a single language, but it is used only by politicians mostly, in political circles. But there is no language unity in this union. Almost more than 100 million people speak German. Another 100 million people speak French. And the rest are just other languages, Italian. So in Europe they've got something like 500 million people living in Europe. And they all got their own languages used. But they have open border policy, and you can go from one country to another. And I think that was one of the greatest benefits for the people. They started traveling, and people especially living in poor countries of Europe, these Eastern European countries. That was another mistake. So first they committed this mistake when they allowed to enter the monetary union very weak countries, economically weak countries such as Greece, Portugal, Spain and Italy. Later they started calling them pigs. Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece and Spain. Pigs. In Germany they were called more respectfully. They called them Gips countries. Gips countries are something that prevents you from going. Yeah, so that very sticky countries that prevent the union from growing. So these pigs or Gips countries were very weak, and they shouldn't be in the Eurozone at all. That was mistake number one. So there could be a monetary union of the core, of the countries of the core. Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, France, Denmark, Belgium, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, these countries, but not the countries of the south, because they were very, very careless about using money, about making debts. They were very easy about taxation. They were keeping tax rates really low because they were trying to attract investments from countries such as Russia or other countries. From Germany, he wanted to buy property. In Spain, for instance, in Greece, they attracted those investments because they have no real manufacturing capacity, no industry in the real sense of the word. What are the nations, economically stable nations, usually have good industry, good manufacturing capacities, countries such as Germany. Only then you have a stable currency, a stable country. So there were these disparities. The euro was introduced. That was a single currency for everyone. But as soon as it started circulating in Greece, for example, it became clear that in a couple of years, it became clear that €1 in Greece bought less than it bought in Germany, for instance, because the weaker country was still running internal inflation. This is a very interesting thing. Yeah, inflation rate actually should be only one figure in the monetary union. It cannot be a diversifying statistical something, yeah, statistical construct. It cannot be harmonized just by saying that you guys have a single currency. That means inflation rates should be on the same level. this cannot be so, because there were still running inflation rates of up to 18 or 20% annually in Greece, Spain, Italy. So that means with each year that passed, the euro became weaker in the south and stronger in the north. That is the disparity. There was a very dramatic increase in disparity between financial and investment flows between the countries of the north and the south. Another very important issue and the problem in the European Monetary Union, the Eurozone, was the problem of the single central bank. So the central bank was created. The central bank has a very important function in the economy. It pursues monetary policy, right? The main policy tool of the central bank is monetary policy, interest rates, key interest rates for each and every subject in an economy, for each and every enterprise, bank, etc. Although what they could not do at those at the start of the monetary union, they could not give the European Central Bank the right to issue the currency, banknotes and coins. So they set only interest rates. And last time, a week ago, we tried to make a sort of a meeting of the board of the governors of the European Central Bank, although that was only a 4-member meeting. There were only 4 countries, and one of the countries was not even a Eurozone country at all. Although we discussed this issue and we identified a couple of problems, that it is very, very difficult thing to have a single currency and a single central bank. So, upon this day, the currency, the single currency euro, is issued by the central banks that existed before the introduction of the euro. So that means each and every state in the Eurozone has its own central bank upon this day. So not only they have a single central bank, the central bank of the Union, the European Central Bank, which is located in Frankfurt, in Germany, and they have 17 more central banks in the Eurozone, plus the European Union is a combination of 27 countries, right? Only 17 countries of the EU use the single currency. That 10 more countries in Europe do not have their own currencies, like Poland with zloty, Sweden with Swedish krona, etc. The Czech Republic with forints, I think they've got forints. Czech crowns, maybe it's okay. So 10 countries in the EU have their own currencies still. However, their central banks also participate in the central of the European central banks. And if you go to any of these countries, if you go shopping in any of these countries, you can pay in euros if you have banknotes or coins. You may pay in euros, but you will be given change in their local currency. And they use the exchange rate of their central bank on the day of this purchase. Right? So if you go to the Czech Republic, if you go to McDonald's or some kind of Burger King, you buy a burger of maybe at 10 euros, at the price of 10 euros, you give a 10 euro banknote and you're given change in their local currency. So that means they are part of this system too, although they do not circulate this currency. One more mistake that they did in the European Union, one more very, very serious mistake. That was in 2004, when especially Great Britain, Tony Blair, the then Prime Minister of Great Britain, Tony Blair, started endorsing the idea of making Eastern European countries join in the Union. So he wanted Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovenia, and other Eastern European countries to join the Union. And he went to those countries, he went to Poland, and he negotiated a lot. Great Britain was one of the countries that were very, very eager that those countries entered the Eurozone, entered the European Union. And like you know, Great Britain became the harshest country in terms of immigration when things turned bad for these countries. So they wanted those Eastern European countries in the EU, but once in the EU, those Eastern European countries, the population of those countries, the people, just strove to the Great Britain, to the UK, because they knew that the standard of living in the UK was much higher in the Czech Republic or in Poland. For example, in Czech Republic, an accountant got the same amount of money working as an accountant in the Czech Republic, the same amount of money like he or she worked at some agricultural farm in Great Britain. They were paid the same amount of money in 2 weeks, just picking strawberries. So many accountants, many professional people, specialists from finance, from other industries, started immigrating to Britain. Not only to Britain, they immigrated to France, they wanted to immigrate to Germany, because this is actually a law. Each and every citizen of the European Union under the agreement, according to the agreement of the EU, has a right to live anywhere they want. If you live in the Czech Republic and you join the European Union, you have a right to live in Great Britain or in Germany. And they did that. The population of Great Britain in 2000 was 44 million people. Today it's 69. In a country with zero population growth of the local people. So this currency had no growth rate. The population had no growth rate in this country. in the UK. So that means these 20 million people were immigrants who came to Great Britain during the years as soon as the Union started attracting those countries of the countries of Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, the Czech Republic. Germany was not a very good place for them, for Poland, for Bulgaria, Romania, because Germany was occupied by other migrants. Mostly Germany was invaded by the Turkish people. Although Turkey is not a EU member, but still they've got a very powerful diaspora there, and they do not let so eagerly many people to Germany. That was a reason behind the decision of the UK to leave the EU altogether. They wanted to leave it because they could not control it any longer, this immigration flow. This actually threatened the survival of this nation, the survival of the culture, civilization, the language, and UK is the country of traditions. This is the country of very strong traditions, and they are not so easily changed. So they decided to leave the EU altogether, although this is also not a very easy thing to do, because to leave the European Union you got to somehow exit all those agreements you signed and your parliament ratified during the years, during the 40 years of being a member of this union. They concluded and ratified lots of agreements. So in order to leave the European Union, you got to renegotiate everything that you negotiated for 4 long decades. This is not a very easy doing. And Boris Johnson, Theresa May, so 2 prime ministers already failed in Great Britain. First that was David Cameron, later Theresa May, now it's Boris Johnson. He also may fail in his renegotiating processes because he holds a very strong line. He wants to exit the European Union trying to keep all those benefits that the UK enjoyed while a member of the EU. Of course, the European leaders, the EU leaders, do not want this. If you leave us, if you leave the EU, then you will be just like any other state outside the EU. You will be treated like Turkey, you will be treated like the US or Norway and other nations, but not a country of the customs union or any other country. So that means Boris Johnson even says that leaving the EU with no deal is a very good thing. So they're very, very determined. So that was a very great mistake. Like I said, once again, I just sum up what were those mistakes. You cannot involve countries with very different inflation rates, interest rates, loan rates in the monetary union. You cannot involve countries with different levels of economic development. It is impossible to have in the monetary union Germany and Poland, or Slovakia, the Czech Republic. They are very, very weak. They are not competitors. The theory says you can involve only those countries that are almost on the same level of economic development. You have the same or similar macroeconomic indicators, growth rates, GDP growth rates, inflation rates, loan rates, tax rates, everything very, very close to each other. Government debt as well, budget deficit, current account deficit. What is Poland and what is Germany in the EU? And the UK, for example. UK's GDP amounts to the GDP of 11 countries, of the 11 weak countries of the Eurozone. So, when it left, that means the EU GDP fell by maybe 15 or even 20%. And this is a very, very dramatic thing. Also, what changed? This is not one of the most changes. That Britain lives, and well, it's going to live, and nothing is going to stop it. But what is changes for the EU itself? Like I said at the start of this lecture, there is a sort of a balance. There are countries of the north and the countries of the south. They've got almost the same amount of people living in the south and in the north. So 200 million people in the north and 200 million people in the south. They have, or they had before the EU, leaving the EU, they had almost equal amounts of votes. The system, the monetary union and any integration agreement works upon votes. This is a democratic union. People vote for legislation, for the introduction of some kind of agreements, right? They've got European Parliament, and they have votes in the European Council everywhere. They have votes. So, before the UK leaving the European Union, they had the north, the countries of the north and the countries of the south had almost equal amounts of votes to elect the government officials, to elect, to ratify agreements and things such as these. Almost equal. 36 to 35% of votes. Now, with the Britain leaving, this is going to change. Now the north is going to have 26% of votes, and the south is going to have 42% of votes. And this is a very dramatic thing, because the countries of the north, what are those countries? They are export-oriented countries. They endorse convertible euro, greater trade, greater globalization, open border policies. They are liberal countries with free trade idea behind those countries. The countries of the south are more isolated countries. They fear competitors, they fear competition and free markets. They introduce they vote for many restrictions in terms of agriculture industry, because they are very, very weak, and if somebody comes to their country, they will be smashed. They fear that they will be smashed and driven from their own local markets. So that means now, as soon as Britain leaves this union, those countries with more votes may vote for restrictions in terms of euro, of using it as a convertible currency, in terms of free trade agreements. There may be more protectionist policies in the European Union now, after the UK leaving it. And there will be other dramatic changes. So that means now they will have to renegotiate, the countries of the North, if they do not want to lose the power in the voting system of this union. They will have to renegotiate all those agreements they concluded over more than half a century. Thousands of agreements will have to be renegotiated and rewritten. And that is very, very difficult thing to do. This is not a one day and not a 1 week thing to do. Also, the European Monetary Agreement says, Articles 63 and 64 of the European Monetary Agreement say that the European Commission, which is the sort of a single government, a club of ministers, of EU ministers, commissars, they call themselves. So the European Commission has a right to stop the euro, to ban it and not use it in circulation. It has a right, the European Commission, without any permission from the European Central Bank, with no permission of the European Central Bank, the European Commission may ban the euro and ban its convertibility, stop its convertibility, according to Articles 63 and 64 of the Single Monetary Agreement. So those two articles are so powerful that the euro may be discontinued from circulation at all. So that means we in Russia, having the euros, will not be able to exchange those currency for the dollars or for rubles. It will not be accepted, this currency. So that means that the euro is actually an ex-territorial currency. That's another problem in the euro. This is an ex-territorial currency, just like any other foreign currency, which is used by everyone, but there is no institution responsible for its circulation and for its issue. The European Central Bank, the institution which is supposed to be responsible for this currency, in reality has no say in the euro circulation, right? It has no say. They only determine interest rates. The key interest rate in the Eurozone is determined by the European Central Bank. This is the only thing they can do according to the legislation approved. Although in June they introduced this fund, they created emergency fund, one more emergency fund in Europe in order to help countries out of the coronavirus crisis. They're going to give grants and they're going to share the debt. That was the first step to introduce a fiscal union in the European Monetary Union, European Economic and Monetary Union. Many economists in Germany, including those I already told you about, for example, the same Wilhelm Hankel or Hans Werner Sinn, they say that this is a currency. The European Monetary Union, the Monetary Union, can work without the fiscal union. It cannot not work without single budget. It cannot work without single common taxes. That means everything has to be single. If you've got a currency, that means you have to have one state, one government, one army, single everything. Debts should be federally divided, like in Russia, for example. If you have, if Moscow, for example, has debts, or St. Petersburg has debts, each other federal subjects will pay for those debts. This is the federal system of budget. We've got local budgets, we've got Republican budgets, and we've got the federal budget. In the Eurozone, this is not the case. Each and every country has its own taxation system, its own taxes, its own everything. They've got different loan rates still to these days, but open border policy means that you can go from Germany to other country and open deposits with banks offering you most favorable interest rates. For example, if in Germany a loan rate does not satisfy you, you go to another country and easily open a deposit with another bank offering you higher interest rates. Or may you go to a country for loans. For example, you go from Greece, where loan rates are high, you may go to Germany, take loans there, and go back to Greece and use this money and pay to a German commercial bank. What's the consequence of this? Banks, local banks, do not receive interest rates, they do not receive interest revenue, and they suffer. This is a sort of an unfair competition, they say. The European Union is also a very, very bureaucratically constrained country, so to speak. Bureaucratically constrained because despite the fact that this is a single market, the common market and customs union, this market does not allow products from countries that are not supposed to sell those products on the single market. For example, Bulgaria cannot sell its cheese in Germany or in France because other countries sell their products there. Or German milk is only German milk should be sold mostly on the European single market. Wine is traded only by, produced and sold by France, Portugal and Italy. The same goes for tomatoes and other agricultural products. Agricultural policy is so an acute problem in the EU that there are strikes happening each and every month. German farmers just throw away milk in millions of liters because they do not like the common price for the milk. They are offered, for example, if they are offered the price which does not satisfy them, they just throw it away. They do not sell it. And this leads to what? This leads to automatic and deliberate increase in the price of raw material, in the cost of producing agricultural products. Italians start smashing bottles with French wine, or the French start spoiling tomatoes coming from Italy. Actually, this is a nightmare, a complete nightmare. These bureaucratic procedures, it is so difficult to understand that those books and those legislation are running into thousands, tens of thousands of pages. And in order to understand, you got to read all those tens of thousands of pages in order just to understand the trading policy in the European Union. And they negotiated those things during decades, many decades. How much time do we have left?
8 minutes.
Now, what was your question, Yuri?